You're listening to the School of Hard Knock Knocks podcast with me, Maury Morgan.
Ladies and gentlemen, your next comedian.
Shouldn't drink on an empty head, you know that, don't you?
That is the shittiest heckle I have ever heard in my life.
Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it.
What's a bucket list?
You have dangerously underprepared yourself for the shit that is about to get real.
From humble beginnings performing at open mics at the Corner Hotel in Richmond to winning a guest spot alongside Dave Chappelle in New York, Johnny Katz's comedy career. You'll hear the word lucky a lot in this interview, but the reality is Johnny is persistent. He simply doesn't give up. New York, London, Melbourne. Johnny has performed in the world's comedy hotspots and then some. And he's also had a successful commercial radio career to boot. So, Hard Knock Knockers, if you're thinking of starting a stand-up comedy career or are already on your way, sit back and enjoy this podcast. And don't forget to give a 5-star rating on iTunes, Stitcher, or any other podcast platform you happen to use. So, here he is, Johnny Katz. Hi, Johnny Katz. How are you,
Good, mate. How's yourself?
Very good. Thanks very much for your time today,
Cool.
And it's good to speak to you. You're back in Australia.
Yes, I am. Yeah, I came back in December.
Excellent. Perfect timing for the warmer weather of Australia, but a bit colder right now.
Yeah, it's good, but, it's still warmer than London, so it's this is a London summer, so it's fine.
Yeah, fantastic. And now, Johnny Katz, I like that surname, but I'm suspecting there may be a Greek background to that name?
You're spot on. It's my surname is actually Katsoulis, and when I started stand-up, I decided to just cut it just to make it easier to say on stage. It was just the simplicity's sake sort of thing.
It's very Hollywood, though. So it's perfect for stand-up and stage.
Yeah, it is. It's got a nice ring to it, Johnny Katz. A lot of people who often say, "Oh, Johnny Katz," it's like you sound like a jazz player,
That cat can sing, that cat can play. Yeah, definitely. You just told us that you got back from the UK in December. You've performed all over the UK, you've performed all over the USA.
Pretty much, yeah.
But can I ask you, before we even begin, because this podcast is listened to by people who want to get into the game.
Yep.
They want to know, where did it all begin? Where did you get your first paid gig?
My first paid gig would have been in Melbourne, I believe, somewhere in Brunswick Street, Fitzroy, for about $40 for a 5-minute set.
Excellent. Did you get a couple of free drinks as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. I probably would have, because I think I was, a couple of beers for sure before the gig.
How young were you when you started your stand-up comedy career?
25.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, this $40 that you got to perform, was that before or after the Triple J Real Comedy State Finals?
It was before.
So what made you, if we go back, what made you decide that you were going to give it a try in Brunswick? I'm assuming you did some open mics before you were offered $40?
Yeah, my first ever gig was in 2001 in July at the Corner Hotel in Richmond on a Wednesday night. It was called a tryout night. It was adjacent to the obviously it was at one section of the Corner Hotel, and adjacent was a dividing wall. On the other side of the wall, it was rock and roll bands playing heavy music, and the noise just used to bleed through into our room, and it made our job horrendous. But, it's where open mic was happening back then. So it was a gig, and I took it. And so that was my first gig. And then I got the paid gig a few months later.
Oh, that was quick. And what made you decide to even give stand-up comedy a go in the first place?
I just liked... I noticed I was 25 years of age, and I noticed a pattern in my behaviour. And the pattern was when I was in a social situation, I would enjoy seeking a laugh or digging for a laugh, and I would enjoy watching people's faces as they'd crack a smile.
Yeah, right.
So on a fundamental level, that's just the drug for me. I wasn't interested in telling a yarn or a joke or a story. I just wanted to see people laugh, and I got a buzz out of it, so I kept trying to chase it again and again.
Well, it's taken you many places. As you said, the UK, the USA. You supported the legendary Dave Chappelle.
Yeah, it was 2004, I believe, in September, at the Boston Comedy Club in New York City, Manhattan.
Yeah.
And I went on and did 10 minutes, and then after the break, he came on and did 3 hours.
Wow. 3 hours?
3 hours, mate, yeah.
My God. How did you get that gig? What was the secret?
I won a competition in Australia called So You Think You're Funny, and first prize was a trip to New York City to study at some American comedy college. I did that for a few weeks, and then the other prize was to do a support slot for Dave Chappelle.
How did you feel when you learnt that news?
It was amazing. I've always, always wanted to go to New York City, always wanted to see that circuit, to experience it, and I'm glad I did. It was amazing. It's a very interesting industry over there compared to London as well.
Oh, yeah. How did your accent go, being an Aussie? How did it go in the US market?
Fine, absolutely fine. If anything, I think the accent bought you maybe 10 seconds longer than any other American comedian, because their ears would prick and go, what's he talking? Is he English? Or,
Yep.
But you still have to be funny. But, I guess it bought me, a couple more seconds of attention span from a crowd.
Interesting you say that, because in another interview I did with Dave Chappelle, who was born in Ireland, grew up in Perth, but has retained that Irish accent. He says exactly the same thing, obviously, though, with an Irish accent in an Australian audience, that the accent gives him that extra couple of seconds where he grabs the audience's attention.
Yeah, I find they'll give me an extra, 30, 40 seconds. But then at the end of that, if I'm not funny, you're just shit.
You're off anyways. So you've played, obviously, a number of countries, but namely the USA, as you just mentioned, the UK just recently, and Australia. What's some of the differences between the comedy across those three countries? Of course, I'm generalising, but what would be some of the differences?
I can only talk about my experiences, and I just think funny is funny. And I've heard people say the Americans don't really understand sarcasm, and that's bullshit. Like, funny is funny. If you're funny, you're funny, And I think what I can tell you about is behind the scenes, the industry. The industry is much harder in New York City. New York City, Manhattan especially, is a city of where you need to have a connection. You need an agent to go in and bat for you to get you a good gig. Right. I was there and I struggled for several weeks, and it took me 2.5 to 3 months to get an audition for an open mic night in 81st Street. I forget, the King Comics Lounge or something like that in New York City. And that took several weeks to happen, and that was my trial. And whereas a London scene, London was a lot quicker, a lot easier. You would ring up a promoter, the promoter would put you down. Pretty much 6 weeks later, you would do your spot. If you did well, he would give you more work. I found it a lot easier in London. In New York, it's like, who are you? Who's representing you? Sorry, I can't help.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. Is there, back in the USA, do they know Aussie comedy, or is it predominantly American comics that are on the circuit?
In 2004, there probably wasn't as many as there are now. With cross-culture of Facebook and YouTube and the success of those mediums, we've blended our culture a bit, like globalization. Yep. So they're aware of Aussie stand-ups like Jim Jeffries. They're aware of what we do. Comics have gone over and done TV spots over there. Whereas back in 2004, it probably wasn't as popular. There wasn't Facebook per se where it is now. There wasn't YouTube. Yep. It was rare to see an Aussie doing stand-up, but they were there. Yep. But they weren't a dime a dozen. Now in LA, the funny thing is, I don't know if you've heard this, but the running trend in LA in culture is, if you're an Australian, you're an actor. You're a wannabe actor if you hear an Australian accent in LA.
Yeah, right. Because if you hear an Australian accent in London, you work in a pub.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's true.
Oh, that's good. We're kind of moving up the ranks slightly then. Now, you've done pretty well. You got to the USA based on a prize that you won, and then later on you got into radio as well, Nova 100. How long was it before you were picked up to come on Nova? And you did a show, was it around about 4 years?
Yeah, I had a show from, I believe, 2005, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, about 4 years, I think.
Yeah, how did you get that gig? Where did that come from? What were you doing prior to that?
I think I was just doing stand-up, and I won that competition, and I supported Dave Chappelle. And when I came back, I somehow, I think it was through the Comics Lounge in North Melbourne, I think I found I got an audition. They were seeking new talent on radio and Nova because they were an emerging radio station, and their slogan was "Sounds Different." And they just looked for something different, and I was lucky enough to audition, and then I was lucky enough to get it.
And was that exhausting, being funny every single night?
Yeah, it was, in terms of marathon versus sprint. I think my advice now would be, radio is a marathon, not a sprint. If you're a comedian on radio, don't go searching for funny stories. Don't go searching to say something funny all the time. Search for an arc, a story that you can cover, a funny arc of a story that you can cover that can go for several days, and then have a few of those things on the go, because then you can go, let's catch up to our segment with this. Then we're back after the break and we'll catch up with our story from this. And you're building a theme, and you're hooking people to come back the next day. What you don't want to do is, you will burn out quickly if you're just rummaging through news trends trying to get stories and look for a punch and then spill it on radio. You'll probably you'll burn out that way.
No, I can imagine.
Yeah, some people just like that. They like writing punchy stuff all the time, every time. But for me, it was more of, I had a bigger enjoyment from doing story arcs.
Yeah. Is that a common career move for comedians? So we see them on stage, and then they seem to either get their own show on TV for maybe a year, 2 years, sometimes a little longer, like Rove, for example, or they get into radio. Yeah,
absolutely, especially radio, because it was at the time where, I mean, look at a comedian. It's a brilliant job description. You know, you're on radio, less is more, get to the point, and then play a song. It's what a comedian does. Less is more, edit your material, you know, focus on your word economy, get to the joke quickly, and move on. And that's why radio is so appealing to comics. We just love that medium. We can say it really quick and get a punchline and move on.
Yeah, right. That leads me to my next question, is about generating that comedy and as you said, word economy, reducing the number of words in any given sentence down to the bare minimum.
Yeah.
What's your methodology to creating new jokes, lines?
I just talk to myself, talk it over. Sometimes I'll put an iPhone earpiece in my ear and pretend I'm on the phone, and I'll just walk around talking. If I go shopping, down for a coffee, I'll just talk so people think I'm on the phone, but I'm actually going through material. I can't sit down and write. I lose in the transition from mind to pen. Something happens and I lose that energy. So I just talk it out loud, and then I go up on stage and I say it out loud, and then I say it again, and usually the fear of the crowd not giving me nothing focuses me on a different level subconsciously to just emit words I don't need, and I find I get to the point quicker. Yeah,
right. Yeah, Chris Franklin, interestingly, said that he never writes anything down either.
Yeah, a lot of comics don't. I know for a fact, I was listening to Bill Burr on how he approaches material, and he has the same thing. He just talks it out on stage and, you know, nuts it out like that. Sure, I have, like, you know, I'll write down like keywords and that to remind myself, but never an actual bit. But hey, that's just my path. You know, like there's so many. You know, some people, like I know a very good comedian overseas who's meticulous, who not only writes every joke but has it filed away in spreadsheets and so forth, and he has catalogued every topic, like dark comedy, corporate comedy, blue comedy, and he has everything filed away. And he's a brilliant act. He's amazing. But it's just, that's how he goes about his business. Yeah.
I think Jerry Seinfeld, I assume you're not talking about Jerry Seinfeld, but he wrote everything down to the letter, and specifically yellow paper, a notepad that had specifically yellow in colour.
Prolific.
Yeah, just specific jotter pad. So his career would have ended quickly had that company gone out of business, I assume.
Yeah.
The idea, so when you're walking around and you're kind of talking to yourself on the mobile phone, inverted commas, how do you generate that initial unique idea, that perspective that no one's ever thought about or come from before?
Well, I personally just talk it out, And then when I forget about it, I have this process which is kind of like putting something in an incubator, and it just sits in the back of my mind and I forget about it completely. And then something will pop in my head while I'm doing something mundane a day later or 2 days later. And I'll go, oh, yeah. That'll work. And then I'll try it on stage.
Yeah, right, right. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of people who listen to this podcast are getting into the business for the first time or putting their toe in the water, a little bit like yourself way back in Richmond, trying their hand, doing as much open mic as they can. What advice would you give to people, obviously based on your own experience, but what advice would you give to these people just starting out today?
Just have fun. And I know it sounds ridiculous how have fun, but it is true. Have fun, because you get caught up in the business of it in terms of trying to appease the promoter by giving him the material he wants to book you again and so forth, especially when you start making good money or you're relying on that money to pay your mortgage or pay your bills. Just don't forget to have fun. Seriously, have fun. And also... this is going to sound weird, but the best advice is not to take advice, to just do it yourself and find it yourself, you know. Some people say, oh, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. Well, you know, one of my favorite comedians stands on his head and uses his feet to talk to a microphone, and it's bizarre to see, but it's very, you know, it's very entertaining. So just...
So does this guy, he scrapes the microphone with his toenail, or is he talking on another microphone near his mouth? Or?
Yeah, his name's Terry Alderton. Google him, check him out. He's just really weird and abstract in a fun way. And yeah, he goes about breaking a lot of rules in stand-up. Like, yeah, I think he comes out and he talks, I think, he stands on his head and like one foot is one character and the other foot's another character, and he just talks away.
Gotcha.
So it's just really inventive and really cool. So don't think, I can't come out and do that. So
the first rule of stand-up comedy is you don't even need to stand up. You can do it on your head.
Exactly, man, exactly. I've heard of other comedians going, just do your material, don't talk to the crowd, or talk to the crowd, don't do your material. Just find your own thing. Maybe if you keep talking to the crowd, you're bombing horrifically.
Yeah.
Maybe you want to talk to the crowd, and maybe that's going to be your thing, but you just haven't found it yet. So keep talking to the crowd, keep bombing, because that's what you want to do, because one day you may be so good at it. There are comedians that just get up and riff for 35, 40 minutes.
Or Dave Chappelle for 3 hours.
Well, yeah, pretty much. So
yourself, you've mentioned a few names. Who's been one of the biggest influences on you in your stand-up career?
Probably Billy Connolly, probably Richard Pryor. And, yeah, I'm very boring in that respect, but I just remember as a child, it was always Billy Connolly, Robin Williams, and then homegrown talent. Graham Kennedy was a must to see. Bert Newton was a diamond for me. Like, I thought Bert Newton was so, I loved the way he just hovered around Graham Kennedy and complimented his stand-up. I think he was just so good, Bert Newton, and I loved watching that. I loved the subtleties that Bert would offer in his comedy. I thought that was genius. So, yeah, Bert, and then Paul Hogan as well. Kingswood Country, Ted Bullpitt, characters like that.
Jeez.
Big influences, even though it's probably not politically correct now.
A lot of the people who listen to this podcast were probably born possibly in the 2000s, so you're going to have to do some research on those names that were just dropped there by Johnny Katz. Yeah, excellent. Well, Johnny, you're in town. You've got a couple of things on the go here in Melbourne. I know that one of them is you are doing some shows at the Comics Lounge, I believe. Yeah, I'm at the Comics Lounge this week, so that would be the 10th of May through to the 12th of May, and then the week after as well at the Comics Lounge. And then after that, what are the plans? June is a little quiet, and then July I'm doing Christmas in July shows here in Melbourne and in Adelaide. Excellent. And if someone wants to get hold of Johnny Katz for their own shows, they want to book you, how would they do that?
You can find me on Facebook, just Johnny Katz, JOHNNY KATS for Sam.
Very approachable. Excellent. Was there any other advice that you wanted to provide those listening?
Just congratulations on wanting to be a comic. I think it's a noble pursuit. It's incredibly lonely at times, especially if you have a shit gig and you're stuck in a hotel room by yourself and the internet's down. But just, it's a marathon, not a sprint. There'll be highs and lows, and it's not over until you decide to never get back up on stage. So, just keep going. It's a lot of fun. It's very rewarding. I think you should focus on the relationship you have with your audience. Please don't be one of those comedians that has negative things to say about any promoter or any venue, because if a venue is not right for you, just move on and find another one. It's just concentrate all your energy on just having a relationship with your audience. Don't end up wasting away like bitching and moaning about the industry. It's a great industry. There's nothing to bitch about. It seriously is beautiful. Get out there and perform. Get a lot of laughs. And in the words of Steve Martin, if you're that good, you can't be ignored.
Wise words, both from you and also Steve Martin. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, Johnny, thank you very much. Good luck on your shows this week, and enjoy that Christmas in July, which is always a weird thing for anyone who doesn't live in Australia to understand.
Yeah, it's weird, but I bloody love it, and I'm looking forward to it because I miss British Christmas. I miss cold, Yorkshire puddings and eggnog and just putting on the heater, wearing an ugly Christmas jumper.
Yeah.
So, it's more for nostalgic reasons for me. Yeah, I love it.
Perfect. Johnny, thanks very much for your time today, and, I look forward to seeing you on stage soon.
Cheers, mate. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
See you, Johnny. Bye.